Hello, everybody. Welcome to Hockey Talk. Today, we're talking playoffs. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching. This is the seventh playoff series preview that we're going to do, the third of the Eastern Conference. Today we're talking Penguins and Rangers, which could be an interesting series. These two teams have met a couple times before. If you want to watch one of the previous series I did, like the Western Conference or Leafs Lightning and Bruins Canes, maybe that's your favorite team. Link to the playlist is right here in the top corner. And you can go and watch your favorite team's playoffs preview if you want. And yeah, so with that in mind, let's talk some Rangers and Penguins, which should be a good series. And we will do that by looking at the numbers. So looking at the numbers here, you can see it's kind of similar to Boston and Carolina if you haven't watched that video. Essentially, both these teams do not give up a ton of goals. The Rangers gave up the second fewest goals in the league, behind only Carolina, and the Penguins the fifth fewest goals in the league, behind Boston in fourth. So again, similarly that Canes Bruins series, this could be a pretty low scoring affair, which would certainly be pretty interesting. Another thing, special teams pretty important. The Penguins have the third best penalty kill in the league, and the power play for the Rangers fourth best. So that should be a really good matchup. Anytime the Penguins take a penalty, you're seeing two elite special team groups go head to head. So that should be pretty fun to watch too. A couple interesting things to note. We talk about the Rangers, only 3.09 goals for per game, not particularly solid. But since the trade deadline, they've added Andrew Kopp, who has 18 points in 16 games, 8 goals, and Frank Vatrano, who had 8 goals in 22 games. The Rangers' clip for goals for per game since the trade deadline is 3.42, so they're scoring quite a bit more. And also worth mentioning that the Rangers are 3-0 versus Pittsburgh since the trade deadline. And the Penguins are probably pretty sick of seeing the Rangers, but they're not quite out of the woods yet. So this is a very interesting matchup, just because I think you've got the Rangers who are kind of heating up in the most important way for them offensively. And it's worth mentioning, too, that the Penguins are 8-9-2 since the deadline. So you've got two teams kind of going in opposite directions right now, which could work really well in the Rangers' favor. But, of course, playoffs, fresh start, anything can happen. But the Penguins are going to need to find a way to turn things around, because things are kind of getting a little murky there for them. So we'll look at the goaltender battle next and kind of see how that shapes up for Pittsburgh as well. So looking at the goaltender matchup here, again, very similar to the Canes series, the Hurricane series. Tristan Jarry, the starting goaltender for the Penguins, it looks like he's going to be out for Game 1. I think he's got a foot injury, so we'll see if he can come back at any point, which means instead the Penguins have to roll with Casey DeSmith, who was 11-6-5 this year with a .914 save percentage and a 2.79 goals against average. It's not bad, but it's not the most ideal situation, especially when you look at who he's going up against. We're talking about Igor Shesterkin, who was probably the best goaltender in the NHL this year, most likely going to win the Vezina, has a decent shot at winning the Hart Trophy for the MVP of the league. So we're talking about a guy who had a spectacular season, 36, 13, and 4, 207 goals against average, 935 save percentage, and a goal saved above expected of 39.86, which I'm pretty darn sure led the league. So, and then how about 6 shutouts to go along with that? So you're talking about, it's not really a secret that the Rangers' second best goals against per game numbers probably stem largely from the fact that they had the best goaltender in the NHL this year in Igor Shesterkin. But there's still some question marks. Obviously, with the Penguins, they don't have Tristan Jarry, who was good this year, but was really kind of, just straight up not great in the playoffs last year. So who knows? Maybe it's a blessing in disguise that they have to roll with Casey DeSmith for Game 1. But with Shesterkin, as good as he was this year, he's never really played in the playoffs. He just has one career start, which he lost. So they're going to need to kind of see something out of him here. because there's a real solid chance that Shesterkin maybe, well, I shouldn't say there's a real solid chance, but who knows if he's a playoff performer, if you know what I mean. Who knows if he has that it factor that we see in a goaltender like Vasilevsky. That remains to be seen. He may very well have it, but obviously he hasn't proven it yet. So goaltending matchup kind of still you think would lean in the Rangers' favor, but there's still a couple question marks for both teams really, and should make it interesting. But I think the strengths of these teams may not be in net. Who knows? With Shesterkin, you think maybe, but again, there's just some unknowns there that you have to kind of tread lightly with. But I do think that Shesterkin will probably play pretty well. The Penguins, I think it's probably safe to say they can't rely on their goaltending to win the many games in this series. So again, looking at the series here, they're looking at the leading scores. A couple things stand out. I mean, the Rangers have a very good talent up top, and they added some depth at the deadline. We talked about Andrew Kopp, who came in and scored 8 goals, and Vetrano, who came in and scored 8 goals. That's going to be huge for them because I think they rely a lot on their top guys like Panarin, Zibanejad, who's not on that list of point getters, but he's up there. He had over a point per game. Kreider with 52 goals. They rely heavily on their power play in many ways. Kreider, I think half of his 52 goals came on the power play. They don't get a ton of secondary scoring, so they kind of need to rely heavily on those guys. So if they can get some clutch performances from their depth, like Kopp, like Vetrano, maybe a guy like Alexis Lafreniere, who's kind of not necessarily shown his full potential yet in New York, maybe this is the perfect opportunity to do that. That would go a long way for the Rangers. And if you look at the Penguins, they've got a lot of experience. Obviously, we remember they won 2 cups not that long ago, so they know what it takes to win in the NHL, but it's also worth mentioning that they haven't really won in a while. They haven't won a playoff series since 2018 when they lost in the second round versus the Washington Capitals. Since then, they haven't won a playoff series, so that's not great. So the thing about the Penguins is they're really solid down the middle, which should be very huge for them at this time of the year. But ultimately, it's going to depend on their best players performing. It's crazy to say this, but Sidney Crosby has not been what we've come to expect from him. And the Rangers are obviously going to try and shut down Crosby and Jake Gensel, who led the team in scoring this year and had 40 goals. And if they can't do that, the Pens can be a very dangerous team. But the Penguins also just need Sidney Crosby to be better. He has just 6 points in his last 14 playoff games, and it's not surprising to see that the Penguins haven't been overly successful in those 14 playoff games. So, I'm not saying he has to put up a 21 in 12 games kind of performance. I don't think he has to be out of this world, but 6 points in his last 14 games is not going to cut it, right? And so if he can have a better series, if he can kind of go off, I really think the Penguins are equipped to beat this Rangers team. But if Sid struggles and doesn't get off the ground, and the guys like Evgeny Malkin struggle, and obviously with Jari out, if the Smith struggles, it could get ugly for the Penguins. So as I get close to logging my prediction here, I think the biggest X factor in this series is Sidney Crosby, which feels like such a weird thing to say, because obviously Sid is, still in many people's minds the best player on the Penguins, obviously. So to call the best player an X factor seems like, well, no, duh. Usually you think of an X factor as a bit more of an unexpected contributor, but for the Penguins, I think he rows the boat, and he hasn't done a whole lot of rowing lately. So let's get to my prediction next, and we'll talk more about that. It feels weird to be talking about the Penguins and saying, oh, they need Sidney Crosby to be better. How often do you hear that, right? They've won 3 Stanley Cups with him at the helm. Generally speaking, if the Penguins aren't winning, you would think it's anybody but Crosby's fault. And I'm certainly not blaming it all on him, but 6 points in 14 playoff games is such an odd thing to be talking about with a player like Sidney Crosby. And so that's why I feel like he's due for a big playoff performance. And I know he's getting up there in age, and he's not quite the player he he perhaps used to be, but he still put up over a point per game this season. He's still, one of the more clutch players in the NHL. He's still one of the more exciting players to watch in the NHL. And I think that he still has the same desire to win as always. I'm going to go a little bold here, and I'm going to say that Crosby has a vintage performance, has one of the best playoff series he's had in a long time, and puts the team on his back, and the Penguins win in 7 games. I really think that Crosby's due for a performance. I really think that he is the X factor in this series. As I talked about, it's a little odd that's the case, that would even need to be said. But I do think that he's due for something. I do think he has more to give we've seen. And obviously teams are keying in on him and trying to stop him. I'm not saying he's giving up or anything. It's just I think that I think the Rangers don't score a ton. And I know obviously they've improved a little bit since the deadline, but that's a smaller sample size. I think Crosby is due for a big performance. And I think there's still a little bit of an unknown about how a guy like Shesterkin, who was fantastic this season, is going to perform under the bright lights in playoff crunch time, right? He really kind of struggled at times down the stretch of this season. I think pressure can do a lot of things to certain people, and I'm not saying that Shesterkin is going to suck. All I'm saying is there's an unknown there, and I think Sidney Crosby is due for a performance, and I think Mike Sullivan is a great coach. I think there's a lot of things that say, in theory, the Rangers look like a very good team, and it looks like it's going to be hard for the Penguins to win. But I'm going to go bold. I'm going to say that Sidney Crosby leads the way, and the Penguins win in 7. If you disagree, I'd love to know why. Let me know in the comments. If you liked this video, let me know by liking the video. Make sure to subscribe. Share with your friends, and I've got one final playoff preview coming out, and then we can get right into watching hockey. So with that in mind, again, like, subscribe, share if you want to, comment, let me know what you think. Why don't you tell me who you think is going to win the cup if you haven't already? I'd love to know why and who you've got. And while you're there, drop your Conn Smythe prediction too. Who knows? And with that in mind, I will see you guys in the last video I will post today. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.